I'm Lydia Ruth. Welcome to the Manse. And I call this Homemaking Radio because it's something to listen to. I don't have too much to show you, but I hope you're all doing the best you can and in your current circumstances, and that you have great plans for improvement. Before you go to do whatever you're going to do, I wanted to share my teacup with you. And this is from one of those discount stores. My teacups don't cost more than $7 because they are not fine china and they are dishwasher safe and they're new. So ladies, today I'm going to talk to you mostly about getting motivated to work at home, to be at home, and to do your best at home, and to be your best at home. And if you are new here, please click the link in the description box below the channel where I am broadcasting this, and go over to the blog where I have embedded it, and then you can see the pictures that go with, and then some of the books I've mentioned and some links, and just enjoy it on the blog, and then you won't be distracted by whatever is on YouTube, and just enjoy listening to it and with the things I have arranged around it. Okay, so today I want to start you out by telling you that if you're a little bit uncertain or not motivated this morning, I'll be happy to run your life for the next hour. So I'll just give you some ideas of how you can get going. You know, some mornings when I don't know quite where to start, even if I have a list, I'll just start walking through my house. And you know, we were taught not to meander through gently anything, but in the Jane Austen stories, they took a turn around the room, and it was considered very good for you, and they said it's so refreshing. And then that can get your brain awake and become more focused on things that might need to be done. But also, I think that having a positive attitude, which I'm going to call thankfulness, be ye thankful, because it changes your brainwaves. It changes the way you think about everything. You can think of anything to be helpful, even if you're just breathing the air today. You know, thankful that you actually got out of bed, or thankful that you could hear something today. So, and teach your children to be thankful for every little thing so that you don't become jaded. And so, speaking of my teacup that I have today, I wanted to tell you that while I was picking it out, I was reminded, you know, because I like to match things up. And this is a handmade jacket that someone had. There were a lot of them, and they were in a wedding party. So there were some of these that someone didn't want, so I took it. But we like to match things up, and I was thinking the first time that the jaded, oppressive, sarcastic attitude came, where some of the girls were trying to match things, and someone said, "Oh no, we don't do that matchy-matchy thing anymore." And I think it was someone trying to choose her furniture or something else. So every little thing that was beautiful, that was calming, that was pretty, that gave us some kind of sense of order or peace, was mocked and torn apart. And even in our generation, and we see from Linda Lichter's book, Simple Social Graces, she wrote about that. She was the person that wrote about the Victorian era and how it was mocked and torn down by the adversaries of goodness and light and loveliness and peacefulness, and they fought their battles. You know, it was a society that was part good and part bad. And so one of the things that she said in that book was that people wanted to do good so that they could feel good. And she said today people want to feel good without doing good. And so one of the things about the home and about yourself is to feel good by taking care of yourself for your homemaking. That should be the first thing. And I wanted to start out by saying that if you start out with thankfulness and have intermittent thankfulness all through the day, it's going to change things. You get one of those maybe days where things are a bit discouraging and you're a bit low on your whatever finances or energy or whatever. Excuse me, I've got a book here I got to get out. And that stop and be thankful for something. There has to be something little that you can be thankful for. And I'm going to start out by reading from this book, Chaos to Clean, because the first thing I always say is to bathe and get dressed. It's like having a new canvas, and getting dressed nicely is something you have control over. And if you do it at home, you don't have to worry about what anybody else thinks. Only your family, only your children, or if you're alone, only yourself, whatever makes you happy. And I'll never forget going somewhere to somebody's event when I was wearing, it was in the 80s, and I was wearing one of these big roses dress that had roses all over it, but everyone else was wearing them too. And from one of the Laura Ashley patterns, and there was all the fabric that was popular at the time, and I just loved them. And somebody said, "Oh, Lydia, why don't you wear roses?" And it's just real sarcastic, and I could sense that this attitude coming on us now, and to where now everybody wears really subdued colors, mostly black and just drab colors, because they don't want anyone to say anything. They don't want to be noticed. But at home, we can do what we want and do what makes us happy. And so I wanted to read, I picked this book up because I had bought it years ago and never obeyed it, but it gave you a month's worth, 30 days of things to do to become more organized at home. And I decided that I would take the course. So I'm going to try to discipline myself to do that. Wrote it down in my notebook that I did day 1. So on day 2, it was about getting dressed. And I wanted to read this to you, the importance of getting dressed. And she mentions Mary Kay. And you know, Mary Kay said in her book, if you can get a hold of that book, that would be good too, because it's really not about her. It's kind of like a biography, and it's not really about her cosmetic, not pushing her cosmetics, but it was talking about her philosophy in life. So let me read this to you while you get dressed, okay? And many years ago, I was a Mary Kay consultant. One main rule for the company was that you could not make a single phone call in the morning unless you were totally dressed, and I mean really dressed, all the way to shoes. The reason behind this rule was that you act differently when you have clothes and shoes on. You are more professional. The customer can tell when you don't feel good about the way you look. If getting dressed makes that big of an impression on someone who can't even see you, then what is going to happen to those who can see you mainly yourself? And at the same time, a man named J.T. Malloy had written a book in the 1980s to help men who had a job at home or an office at home and used the phone a lot. And he suggested that you wear something professional to make a phone call, because it made a difference in the sound of your voice and in the way you stood and the way that you approached your business with careful attention to detail. And I don't know if anyone understands that anymore, but you could do an experiment. I've suggested that several times, is to kind of slop around one day and things that don't mean anything to you except, you know, they're comfortable. And then another time, wear something nice and see how the people's attitude, see how your attitude, see if you find more good feelings in your home and in your life. But like I say, home is where you can do what you want to do and not worry about whether this is going to be acceptable out there. And she said she had a lot of other things in here, but this is only day 2. And it was when you first get up, get dressed. And my favorite thing is a dress. Usually I hand make it, or it's made out of cotton, and I like a jacket to go over it for when I go out in public. So the jacket will, or the little top or the little bolero will match it in some way and make it look more coordinated. And to me, that's easier than a whole bunch of separates. I really like a dress because it's one piece. The blouse and the skirt are already connected, and I don't have pieces all over the place. I do have a few exceptions, but so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some news. You know, we are always listening to the news and trying to figure out what's going on in politics and everything. And it's interesting that clothing became so political that people were just mocking others that wanted to dress up. And I remember the first time it happened to me, I was just like in total shock. I was 16 years old, and there was a track meet where my brother was in, and he won a race. So I was standing there at the track meet, and I had normal clothes on in those days, the 1950s, and I had normal clothes on that you would wear to something like that, but you know, we were neat and tidy and everything. And I asked some of the other girls that were there, had they ordered, because we used to order our school clothes through the catalogs, and it was always very exciting. You'd get new clothes, and we wanted to look our best, even at a young age. And the girls were saying, oh, we don't bother with that anymore. That was creeping in, you know, even in the late 50s, early 60s. And we don't bother with, why should we, they said. Why should we? We don't care what we wear to school. And I was just speechless. I didn't even know what to say. And so this was creeping in. But now that you have your home, you can dress the way you want to, and you can be formal if you want to be. One of the reasons that my clothes, I can come here and say I've had this for 30 years, is I wear the aprons over, and I wear the aprons out, throw those out, and I've covered my clothes all these years, so I can even keep t-shirts and denim skirts a lot longer because I cover them while I'm doing housework. And so I wanted to tell you some news. And you know how I like news. I'll be quoting a lot of things from old books. And that is speaking of clothing. Speaking of clothing, if you've got young girls at home that think they're ready to kind of go out there and do things, and you need to make sure that they know how to properly dress themselves so that they're not showing extra rolls of fat with clothing so tight that it shows on them. How to wear clothing that brings out the best in their complexion, how to dress so that they look coordinated. And I know some of it might seem a little silly, but I even go to the dollar store and I get the winter gloves that match my jackets. They're like $1.25, and you can get the color that matches the jacket you wear, because it makes me feel, it settles my brain to do something like that. Maybe not you, but I care about things like that, and people do not care anymore, and it's really sad to see it. And even when you go to church, you can't depend on anybody being an example. So what you have to do is just be that example. Be the person you want other people to be. So here's the news. Let me see. Where is it? It was several. Okay, let's start out with the Spirit Airlines. They made a dress code so that their passengers cannot come to the airport or the airplane without shoes, and the women cannot wear, I don't know what you would call them, but they have to be covered. You have to have, you know, normal shirts and things. You can't dress immodestly. You can't wear, you have to be covered. You can't wear short shorts. You can't wear little strappy tops. You have to have normal clothes. But you know something? We don't need those rules. If we'll regulate ourselves first, we don't have to worry about what the new rules are and what the new dress code is. If I dress like this for going on a flight, I don't have to pay attention to any of these rules. And if I'm wearing a long skirt, I don't have to pay attention to that. But what happens is, when you regulate yourself, these places of business don't have to have these codes and regulations because they know everybody's going to regulate themselves. And I was thinking, I wish there was, you know, some kind of dress code. I've always wished that there was some kind of dress code because it helped people that didn't have guidance to have some rules. Some people work better with rules because they can't understand the principles of modesty. And I was reading this thing about Spirit Airlines having a dress code for people, and I thought about modest clothes and how nice they are. You know, if you cover your arms and everything, you've got more fabric, you've got more, you can put more sparkle on it. And I thought, modesty, thy name is beauty. I think I got that from Sense and Sensibility. Was it Colonel Brandon? No, it wasn't. It was Willoughby. Okay. Brandon, thy name is whatever. Anyway, so if we regulate ourselves and we get in the habit of doing that in our homes every day, our decisions are very quick to make. We don't have to go through a bunch of clothes and open a bunch of drawers and think, oh, what'll I wear? Because we know what the principles are. And for me, it's sleeves and covering, and covering especially the private parts of your body. And that was one of the things this airlines had, that the private parts of their body had to be covered, and not also they regulated it according to, they couldn't be too skin tight, showing everything, showing all their private parts. And so then, let's see, there was another, it was the Wisconsin, I believe, state legislature, and I'm not sure if it was Wisconsin, so sorry to you kids out at Wisconsin, I'm not sure what it was, but one year, a few years ago, tried really hard to pass legislation to get the women in the legislature to wear sleeves. Now, I've had a big thing about sleeves, you know that, because I sew. And if you don't have sleeves, then you have your bare arms, and if you don't keep them in perfect shape and keep them tanned and keep them, and they're supposed to be so glamorous to have bare arms. But, cloth covers a multitude of flaws in your body. And I just love sleeves, and I love the different kinds of sleeves, and I have a collection of patterns that show different sleeves of different eras, and I just love them. And I just really think that we should have sleeves, and I really admired, I don't think it passed because the liberals came out, not the liberals, but just this attitude came out and said, oh, we're going back to the, this is going to be a dictatorship, and this is going to be run by people who establish style for people. But wearing sleeves, here's the thing, it wouldn't happen. None of this would happen, of having to companies and governments to establish standards for dress wouldn't even happen if the women would stay home, guide their homes, teach their daughters, develop a sense of style and dignity in dress, and not be so flippant about clothing. To be serious about it. I just want to veer off on a little story here. I remember the day when the JCPenney and other stores around the world, places that I've lived, had a little bench outside the change room in these nice stores. And the greatest joy that a husband had was to buy a dress for his wife. And so she would take several dresses into the change room, and then she'd come out while he was waiting there, and he would just swoon. His eyes would pop open, and he'd say, well, I'll take that one, or take that one. And she was anxious to know what looked nice on, what he thought looked nice on her, and it was his greatest, he was just bursting with pride to be able to buy this dress for his wife. And then also there was the hat and the handbag and the shoes, and so it was a big deal. And even when we were growing up, we would order stuff from the catalogs for school, and it was a big deal. And but we learned to coordinate things, and the dress was the best deal because the top was already coordinated with the skirt. You see what I'm saying? And so, but now, of course, when you try to, and we were taught, how to match up your jacket or your cardigan with it all, so that it would all look very nice and put together. And there's no reason that we can't be, I've got a list here, polished and professional. And it begins in the home. If you get your kids used to not wearing clothes, or just running around in their pajamas or clothes that are so bare, then they won't be comfortable when as they grow older, with clothing that covers them. And so get them used to feeling good about clothing on their arms and their legs and everything. And it's like the lady that several times I've gotten comments where the way that some women have kept their daughters looking good was when they were younger, they'd take them into stores and try on modern dresses that had, the principles about them, how they made them look slim and long and covered and just different things, and they would point out what the virtues were in, what the good things were in a certain style, and kept their daughters interested in the clothing. Now, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the Ivory Coast. The Ivory Coast on the continent of Africa made a rule. Here's another thing. None of this would be necessary if women would stay home, guide the home, take care of their health at home, take care of their hair at home themselves, stay away from the trends and the hairdressers, and you can still look good. Be natural and healthy and happy, and stay away from worrying about and trying to impress people. And so the Ivory Coast made a rule for the, you know how they have these beauty contests for the Miss This and the Miss That and everything, which of course we did this at home and homeschooling. And of course the children would all dress up and then we would vote and everybody won. But it gave them a chance to be Miss This or Mr. That, and they all got prizes. And because I said you don't have to enter any of those contests, because we'll just have one here and everyone will win. And the beauty about homeschooling is everybody gets an award for being the top of the class. Everybody's the top of their own class, and we just don't compete with the world. So of course that could all be solved. These rules would not have had to been made that I'm going to tell you about if the women were being modest at home and quiet, and not being performers. So many of the young women today, even the homeschooling, they want to perform. They want to get in front of a group and sing, or they want to get up in front of a whatever. Well, I solved the problem with my children is that they each had to get up in front of me and read or sing or play something, or show something. And we even had, I remember one time, an art gallery where everybody did some art, and I hung it up somewhere, and we pretended to walk through an art gallery. And anything they can do out there, we can do better or worse. And so let me get back to the Ivory Coast. They made a rule that anyone in these contests, Miss Ivory Coast contests, had to have natural hair. No hair weaves, no wigs, no, and apparently no products, that would change the hair color. And they could use normal things natural things that would, bring shine to their hair, and they could braid their hair, and they could do different things with it, but they could not have all this fake stuff. And later on it was learned that that some of these things that people attach to their hair are very bad for you. It can even create permanent baldness, and also some of the chemicals and things are not good for you. And so they made a rule, and of course all the comments were, oh, these men are trying to control us and everything, but this was decided by the people that judge these contests. And even though I definitely wouldn't contribute to participate in anything like that, these rules are really good. And one of the problems is that instead of concentrating on the dress, the clothing that enhances your figure and your face and stuff, now they're getting closer and closer to the skin and the hair and altering all that with tattoos and bleaches and things like that. And they're getting away from what really, we used to use hats. You could put a hat on and it would tame unruly hair. And I was born with really frizzy hair. And you can find pictures of me in my book, Just Breathing the Air, with this real frizzy hair. But a hat, and of course in the 60s we liked the scarf. You saw, I'm trying to think, Grace Kelly in one of her movies, and she had a little silk scarf, and we loved those scarves. And the bandanas, we just tie them under our chin, and they kept the mosquitoes away, and they kept our hair flat if you had real flyaway frizzy hair. But the hat was so good because It took the attention off of anything that you thought you had a flaw. If you thought you had a flaw, or your skin was too red, or you felt like that maybe you had a double chin or something, you wore a hat, people would look at the hat. And but it also gave you some privacy. If it had a brim, you had a privacy. You didn't have people looking straight at you or into your face. And people don't understand the principle behind accessories like hats and gloves and shoes. They just don't understand it anymore. And the gloves could protect your hands. You know, you go to the grocery store and there's a shopping cart. Everybody in the world has touched it. It's kind of neat to have a pair of gloves in your purse. It just, you know, push the shopping cart around if you have to. And you know, touching doors and things like that. And so I just think that that was a good idea. Of course, there was a big backlash against it, but they'll be sending their representative to the whatever, Miss World contest or whatever, and she'll be so natural, it'll be appealing, because, you know, they wanted to see the real girl, that, you know, and also, yes, some of them wanted to ban the false eyelashes, which I agree with too, and there were some other false things that they wanted to ban. Just let it be natural. Okay, so then there was another one. There was a company, and I've forgotten the name of it, but I just wrote it down. It was employers were requesting that to avoid having to wear a uniform to this company, and really it's mostly aimed at the women, but some of the men too, that they had to have a dress code. And they had to wear a jacket over their clothing, and their clothing had to be long and not, you know, above the knees and things. Just things that was so, back in the 50s they were trying to do that, and now we're back where we started. So I wanted to talk to you about that and have you think about some of that for a little while. And remember, modesty, thy name is beauty, because with modesty, you've got more of a chance to put swaths of fabric around you. And you know, in the Bible, when it talks about women being modest, that word is a Koine Greek word meaning draped, loose, and flowing. And I have several articles on the sidebar about modesty, and I connect it to drapery. And at night, you know, we close our drapery. I don't know if people use drapes anymore, but they're loose and everything, and they keep out people from peering in, and they protect your furniture and things from the sun, and even you from the sun, and they give you privacy. Well, this is the same with clothing. Kerastan means the Greek word for modest means loose and flowing and draped. And so drapery gives you privacy. So drapery on yourself gives you privacy. And that does not mean dull either. We pick pretty curtains for our windows. We try to make everything nice in our home. And but some people don't have the same respect for God, because God created your body. Have some respect and show some dignity for the great gift He has given you of yourself, of your body, and reflect that beauty, the beauty that God has created on the earth. And so it's hard to explain. If you don't have it bred into you, you will have to learn it, and you will have to find ways to be pretty, and also you don't have to show everything. And the trouble also with too much bareness, ladies, is that if you get used to having bare arms all the time, see, some people misunderstand that right to bear arms thing. They think it means the right not to have any sleeves, right not to cover your arms. If you get that, then people start tattooing their bare skin. Well, if you tattoo your bare skin, then you start having to wear less clothing so you can show off your tattoo. But back in the day, before women were using tattoos, which I think is just terrible, and I'm not going to hate you because if you have one, but I've known people that learned better, and now they wear clothes that have to cover all the tattoos. But there were things that you could get to wear, like you could get this real sheer fabric and it would have embroidered roses or patterns on them, and you could make a sleeve out of it, or a collar, and it'd have all these little things on them that are the same designs as some of the tattoos, but the beauty of a dress is it's not permanent. And I often think that none of this would happen. The Spirit Airlines, the Ivory Coast rules, the Wisconsin legislature, I don't think they got those rules through, but none of that would be necessary if women loved having, if they valued a dress. And I remember how much we used to value a dress and how important that was to us. In fact, it was so important to me that I knew that I wouldn't be able to have one unless I made it myself. And that's how I got so interested in fabric. And you don't really have to have sewing classes or anything like that. You just need to learn how to drape. And I've known girls that wanted to sew so bad, but they couldn't attend a class, so they would drape a piece of fabric on them, and then they would say, okay, I need to sew this. And they'd just run to the machine and sew this. And then they'd put it back on and figure that out. And then they would do the other sleeve. And then they would after a while, they figured out how clothing could be constructed. And there's no rules anymore about whether you have a set-in sleeve or a raglan sleeve that's easily connected. And I think one of the worst things is some of the sewing classes when we were in high school were so difficult that it discouraged some of the girls. And one of them was the set-in sleeve. That's a very difficult sleeve to sew. But before the 50s, there were, and even in the 50s, there was the sleeve that, I'll just draw it for you. It was connected to the garment like this. This is the sleeve. You see there's the blouse, and this sleeve is sewn in one piece, is cut in one piece here. So you would just sew those two pieces together, and you don't have to set in your sleeve. I have several patterns like that. And so I just wanted to lecture you a lot about your clothing today, and because it's something you can control, and it's something that you can lift up, and you can study the effect of color on your mind and on your motivation. Because one time when I first began these videos, I did a video, and of course I don't label anything very much. In the very beginning, I did a video and went through the script, the Bible, and every time I found a reference to clothing, I went to the color. There was blue, and there was purple, and there was black, and there was white, and there were all kinds of colors, and it all had an indication of what your status in life was, what your authority was, what your event was, and what things were worn for what, and what represented what kind of thing. And so you study color, you're going to have a different attitude. And I taught my daughter and granddaughter, just look at the day and say, what does that feel like? Oh, I see the little violets are blooming. Let's get out some fabric with a little print that's similar to that and make something. Or, let's find something you've already got and let's reflect what's going on here. Are the daisies growing today? Let's wear your daisy dress. And so to give them a mood. And when I went to Alaska on a visit, I grew up there, I went to the fabric store and I found fabric that looked like what are those? I'm trying to think of the flowers that grow on a stalk after there's been a burn, after there's something has burned. These beautiful flowers grow up. I think they called them fire flowers. I'm not sure now. I should have looked that up before I came, but I was fascinated with them. We used to pick them, put them in big jars, and my mother said I liked the flowers better outside, so we didn't pick them and put them in bouquets because she wanted to go for walks and see everything growing outside. And but I found fabric that looked like the scenery and the areas that I had seen, and just the loveliness all around me. And I called it mood dressing. And so, and also there's the seasons, we know that you can dress for. But and of course, none of this is absolutely the most important thing in our life. You won't benefit by it socially or monetarily or anything like that, but it pays to care. And there are a lot of people that grew up without parents that cared about any of that, and they regretted, they wished that they had been better cared for when they were little, that their parents had cared more about what they wore. Now, being at home, and if you're careless in dress, it's possible you're more careless in your homemaking, more careless in life, more careless in speech. I don't know how that connects, but I have heard that, careless in dress might indicate careless in something else. And so even in the real olden days, like back in Victorian times, maybe even later than that in my lifetime, girls that were carelessly dressed were not sought after by men who wanted a good wife and a good home, because they thought that it indicated and that's vice versa too, the men as well, that they wanted someone who was careful about their lives, because they knew if you're careful about yourself, you'll be careful about others. And one thing that I liked about the Laura Ashley clothing that came out way back in the 70s and even 60s was that they were multi-generational. A grandmother, I bought patterns that had the grandmother and the daughter and the granddaughter and the three patterns in one, and they were made out of the same fabric, very, very similar in style, and they covered everybody. You didn't have, sometimes I go look on the web of like women over 50, 60, 70 to see, clothing, and I wouldn't wear that stuff. I'd just go back to my old Laura Ashley dresses, which I bought when I was in my 20s, and I could wear them again, and now that I'm vital, and I'm just as happy in them. They still look good on me, and I just really don't believe in that, what to wear now that you're over 50, but except for the fact you mustn't wear the immodest clothing that you wore when you were really young. You just can't do that. And you really shouldn't be doing it when you're young. But when you're older, your skin's going to be crepier. You might have varicose veins. You need to wear clothing that brings attention to your eyes, not to the rest of your body. And so that's all I will say about that. And also, dressing well at home can make you more pleasant to be around. If you want your children to seek your company, your children and grandchildren, to seek your company when you're older, you're going to have to be pleasant at home. Make home pleasant with your attitude and your words and your temperament. So be pleasant to be around, dress well, speak well, stand, sit, and walk well, do well, and be well. I have a couple of things I want to read to you. Be well. There was a list of books that came to mind, and I'll just give them to you that we had back in the day. I don't know what the authors are, but I just thought of these. Back to Eden was one of the first health books I ever read. Not everything in it would appeal to me or anything, but it was just a general idea that I took. None of These Diseases was another book that I just loved, and it was about people in the Bible that God said, if you will, obey me and live this way, and you'll be happy and have none of these diseases. And it's amazing, when we get where our mood is low, it can also depress our bodies and we can get sick. And Backyard Pharmacy was another one I liked, and Greater Health God's Way. So I'll list these on the blog, if you'll go over there to listen to this on the blog. Okay, so I'm going to read something to you out of this book here, and it's called Do's and Don'ts of Yesteryear, and it was by Eric Sloan. I have read several of his weather books to you, and how weather affects the mood at home. And I came across this little thing on how to make toys. And there was this button. Do you remember this? My goodness. You know, our mothers would give us a button and we'd put two strings, put a string through it, and put a little, well, I guess a little wooden handle on each end, or another button, and pull it, and it would twirl, and it was so entertaining. I don't know. I'll take a picture of it and put it on the post so you can see that. See that button there? Do you remember that? And also there's a how you can use spools. You know, like when you run out of thread and you keep the spools, what you can do with those to make a toy out of. I really enjoyed that, and so I'll read you. I've just picked out a couple of places here to read to you. Another thing is that manners at home are so important because that's part of making it pleasant. One of the things people think they can do is they come home and they just sack out somewhere and behave boorishly, leave their stuff around, talk with their food hanging out of their mouth, and leave all their junk around, and then say things that aren't very edifying or kind, because after all, at home we can just relax and kick back and unwind. Look, we've got to be more formal in our speech and our behavior at home, because those manners will automatically flow out to others in society. And if you'll do that, if you'll correct yourself at home and monitor yourself at home and regulate yourself, then you don't have to, quote, put on your company manners when someone comes over. You don't even have to remember them, because they'll be part of you. They'll just be automatic. Be as kind to others when you're out as you are at home, and vice versa. So here it is. I marked a couple of pages. Don't neglect this. I don't know when this was written, but Eric Sloane wrote books in the 1940s, and his wife later on reprinted a lot of these, and some of them were written clear up into the 1970s and 60s. Don't neglect, this is called in Dress and Habits. Don't neglect personal cleanliness, which is more neglected than careless observers suppose. Don't wear soiled clothing. Be scrupulously particular on this point. Don't be untidy in anything. Neatness is one of the most important of the minor morals. Interesting choice of words. They mentioned this, you know, make sure your fingernails are clean. A lot of this can be solved by the shower and the bath, you know. It keeps all these smaller areas cleaner. Let me just keep reading here. Here's another one here, and that is speech and writing. And then there was another one here for women, so I want to read these to you because I believe that manners are part of making the home a nice place to be. You know, we go to a lot of trouble to clean, to arrange, and maybe even, you know, put a few nice things around. I know not everyone decorates, but we also need to have good speech and good habits at home that make others at home want to be home. You know, I mentioned that dressing well is something within your reach, and I remembered a book I had read by Catherine Marshall called Christy. And she said she was in the Appalachian Mountains and she was a teacher. It was with a religious group, and she said that she noticed that the girls that she was teaching admired her clothing and admired her hair, admired everything. So she made up her mind every day to have a clean blouse, to wash her clothes and have a clean blouse and to have clean hair and everything, because these were some of the habits that she wanted them to learn. It's the same with you as a homemaker or mother, and even if you're alone. It's very important to maintain that dignity because it gives you more humanity, more humanness. And you've been given a great gift. If you've got yourself to take care of, you've been given a great gift, and it's great motivation. It can be your ministry to take care of yourself, because others will be edified by it, and you will too. So here is here are the rules for speech and writing from some do's and don'ts of yesteryear. Now, of course, we don't need to read all these books about, like Linda Lichter's book, Simple Social Graces. I've read a lot of books to you, but you know, if all you had was the scriptures, you would read, be courteous one to another, and you'd figure out how to be courteous, and you would read, don't repay evil for evil, and don't gloat at somebody else's mistake, and always be happy for others' success. And so you would learn just by that. If that's all you had, you could learn. Okay. Study books of grammar and the writings of only the best authors. I know a lady who, she doesn't have time to do a lot of reading, but she wants to put things around her house that have a high value, and like some of these by that lamplighter, you know, they have good quality bindings and gold on them, and she just stacks them all around because it gives her house this atmosphere that she wants. She doesn't have time to read them all, but she wants the influence there. So, okay, now here's something about good speech. Don't talk in a high, shrill voice. Avoid nasal communication. Remember I told you there's the upper resonators and there's the lower resonators, and we do have a tendency to talk through the nasal, through our nose, but instead of using our breath, but it should be a little bit of both. Instead, let your voice extend from your chest. Learn to moderate your tone. Moderate your tone, dear. Hyacinth in Wives and Daughters. Learn to moderate your tone, speaking in a low register, but never low enough to strain the ears of your listener. Don't use slang. There is a certain slang known as gentleman's slang and other slang that is vulgar. Now, I was reading on someone's website about the habits of the Victorians' manners, and one of the rules was never speak of vulgarities in front of women and children. We might notice men are rougher, and you know, that can be expected, but the women and children should not be subjected to it. And I can still remember, but now of course everybody's talking about everything. They're talking about every gross thing, from their underwear to their last visit to the hospital to all their bodily functions, and they talk about it in front of the women and the children, and everybody's just talking about this stuff all the time, and it can really make us sick. And we call them organ recitals. But, you know, I decided when I got sick, if I said anything about it, well, I'm not feeling well. Oh, really, what's the matter? Oh, just general, you know. And you don't want to. People are so curious about all this, and then they want to repeat it and tell it all around. So let me do this again. Don't use slang. There is certain slang, according to some, known as gentleman slang, and other slang that is vulgar. If one does not know the exact difference, let him avoid using it completely, and then he will be safe. So watch your language, especially at home, and even, you know, when you're training little children to use the bathroom and stuff, do it in private. Say things in private. Don't get them used to using words that later on won't be acceptable. They're using all those words now. It's disgusting, isn't it? Don't use profane language anywhere. Don't multiply epithets and adjectives, and don't be too fond of superlatives. Moderate your transports. That's an interesting use of words. Don't use completely meaningless exclamations such as, oh my goodness. We should be able to speak our expressions of astonishment in a better way, I'm sure. Okay, they have other things here that are very good, but I'm not sure I want to read them all. Oh, this is an interesting one. Don't use the word hate or despise. You know, I've had visitors that will say they'll be talking about food or something, they'll say, that's disgusting. And our children weren't allowed to say things like that. Not that they weren't allowed, but my husband and I never said them, so our kids didn't pick up the language. But that's the common thing now, to use the word hate, despise, disgusting, and express dislikes. The young lady who says she hates a certain color and despises a certain food may have sound personal principles, but she evinces a great want of discrimination in the selection of epithets. Okay, so here are some more. There's one more here for women. I have read this to you in the past, but not all of it. Don't submit servilely to fashion. Believe in your own instincts and the looking glass rather than the dictations of the fashion makers. Now that's what I was trying to tell you. When you're home, you can start developing an instinct and a mood for clothing that suits you and suits your mood and suits your mind. And you'll know when it's time to not be noticed. Like if you go out and you don't want any attention about what you're wearing, you can wear your dark coat over it all. But at home, you get to wear what you want to and enjoy yourself. And if people wore nice clothing and they were happy with their clothing and colorful clothing, they wouldn't find the need to add so much of the fake stuff to their hair and their faces and everything else, and mess too much with their bodies and, you know, the tattoos and the surgical things. That's not necessary if you have a hat. That's not necessary if you have a pretty dress. One of the best books that I had back in the 80s was Color Me Beautiful, and it showed how you could hold certain fabrics up to your face to see what brought out your eyes the best or what made your skin appear a little more sallow. And then you would choose a certain season, spring, summer, winter, fall, that kind of thing. And I still have that book. Don't forget that a bonnet, that's talking about a hat, should be so constructed as to cast the features particularly in shade. For the delicate half shadows that play in the eyes and come and go on the cheek give to women's beauty one of its greatest charms. We should do a whole class on that. Can I read that to you again? Don't forget that a bonnet should be so constructed as to cast the features particularly in shade, for the delicate half shadows that play in the eyes and come and go on the cheek give to women's beauty one of its greatest charms. When fashion thrusts the bonnet on the back of the head, defy it. When it orders the bonnet to be perched on the nose, refuse to be a victim of its tyranny. This is so interesting because I think the best way to ease back into the hat or the bonnet is to take a headband from the dollar store and just put one of their little fabric roses that you can buy in another package and just kind of decorate the headband, and then take some netting and put that on and just put it on the side of the headband and get used to having the little, they call them fascinators. That might be interesting. I don't know if I'd want to wear it at home while I was doing housekeeping, but maybe to go for a walk. So that was just an interesting little play on words. Maybe I could type that out for you on the blog where I'm embedding this. Now listen to this. This is interesting. This book wasn't really written for society. It was do's and don'ts of yesteryear, and Eric Sloane wrote things about homesteading and making things and the home life. Don't wear at home a faded or spotted gown or soiled clothing or anything that is not neat and appropriate. You know, we have to give the home some dignity and act as though it is a sacred place. Would you let someone come in your home and just kind of disrespect it by what they what they were wearing by not wearing something decent or at least respectable. You know, would you let someone come in and do that in your home? Well, if you wouldn't, well, the trouble is, this is a hard principle to teach because people would today. They don't care. They have gorgeous homes. Most of you have a much better situation than I do. And I've seen people with beautiful homes, but they care not for their mode of dress. They care not about it. And I would like to. I've even seen people that own these gorgeous Victorian homes that I love, and they will get a magazine spread. They will get a photographer out there, and they will get to be in a magazine. But then when the owners and the lady of the house is photographed, she's just sitting there with hair cutoffs and things that don't even go with her beautiful Victorian home. I'm the opposite. I'm in the manse. It's kind of like an old shack, but I'm dressing like the Victorian in here. It gives it a high-end look. Appear at the breakfast table in some perfectly pure and delicate attire, fresh, cool, and delicious, like a newly plucked flower. Dress for the pleasure and admiration of your family. I should just leave you on that thought. It is just so beautiful. And then the next chapter, maybe I could save this for another time, but the next chapter is called Not Pleasant to Behold. And it's about things not to wear at home. Isn't that interesting? And the next one is about, don't forget to thank people at home for various things that they do. We take it all for granted sometimes, don't we? And sometimes I'll think of something that I'm cleaning up and I'll notice that my little grandson put something away or something, and I'll just remember to send him a little note on how much I appreciate him sorting that little area there. And because, I don't think that much of the things we do people notice or are thankful for, but we can change that at the home. Let's see if I've got anything else. Okay, I wanted to tell you about this book here, Stepping Heavenward, and you can get soft cover copies of it. But this is one of the things that I think that a lot of young people at home suffer from, that this girl had to get through. And that was, in general, it's been a while since I've read it, but it's written in diary form, going from one year to 1800 something to something else. It's very good lessons in it. And it's something that everybody suffers from when they are a certain age. They want to help the world, the whole world, but they forget to be nice at home. And here's this girl that starts out, she's out taking care of her sick relatives in another house, or somebody else she knows, or she's doing things for other people, teaching Sunday school and doing things for other people, but at home tends to be less helpful. And we all have that problem. It's always more fun to go and help someone and neglect our own family and our own children. So I really recommend this, but because it was written long ago, you're going to have to read it aloud, just sentence by sentence, because it's not one of those books that's very easy to read because of the way it's written, and it's heavy with thought. So I want to read the first page, January 15, 1831. Be very good for you all to keep diaries. I never kept one. I felt I was too busy, but I could just make up one, couldn't I? Going from 1950 to today, that'd be kind of fun. January 15, 1831. How dreadfully old I am getting. I am 16. Well, I don't see as I can help it. There it is in the big Bible in my father's own hand. Catherine, born January 15, 1815. And this reminds me, and it's called Stepping Heavenward by Elizabeth Prentice. And it came from the Lamplighter catalog. But that little entry reminded me of whenever someone says, how did we get so old? It wasn't our fault. We can't help it. It has nothing to do with us. it's God's fault. So I'm going to leave you with that because it's about time to quit and quote you something from Emma by Jane Austen. And I always loved this first part, and those of you who have the movies from the 1990s, those are the best ones. And it started out saying, in a world where there were all kinds of big worldly events and even wars, there was one lady that was only concerned about her household and the things going on in her realm with her friends and the village that she lived in. And in a way, I think that's how we're happiest. Be concerned about what's going on at home. There's lots going on in the world right now that we can be excited about and happy about, but what if it's not? We still have to create the stability and happiness in our homes, because we can't wait. And I told you when I first started this blog many years ago, we can't wait for politics to straighten itself out, and we can't wait the world to straighten itself out. And so to live a good and happy and beautiful life. So ladies, I hope this has somewhat been helpful to you, and I will try to remember to put things on the page so you can enjoy that too. And thank you for encouraging me and for everything you do for me. If I owe you a letter or if I needed to send you something, I'm so sorry. I'm a little disorganized here. And so stay close to Christ, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.